Welcome back to the Elias Makos Show in the third hour of the program. We begin this third hour of the show with Bernard Drainville, Quebec's education minister. Now, the Quebec government is expanding on the province's ban on religious symbols to include all school staff, including support workers and volunteers. Expansion of Bill 21 also prohibits students from wearing face coverings such as full face veils on school grounds. Let's find out the rationale behind this move. Bernard Drainville in studio this morning. Monsieur Drainville, bienvenue à l'émission.
Merci, Monsieur Elias. Nice to be here.
It's great to have you in studio. First things first. Obviously, this came about because of the Bedford school situation.
That was the starting point.
That was the starting point.
Yeah.
But since then, why don't we get into just how pervasive this problem is outside of Bedford? Is it one school, or do we seriously have a problem here where religion, fundamentalist religion, has been creeping into many schools?
I don't know if we can say that religious fundamentalists have been creeping into schools, but we can surely say that there's been many schools where there have been reports on numerous failings with regards to several obligations relating to secularism, relating to, well, for example, religious holidays, Elias, religious holidays, just for the School Board of Montreal, le Centre de Services Scolaires de Montréal. There's been 3,600 religious holidays in 2.5 years. So that means people who go on a holiday, they're being fully paid for the holiday just because they claim to be religious. Mm-hmm. Now, that means that if you have a religion, you have more holidays than if you do not have religion. And that obviously creates some inequities amongst the staff, but it also creates problems considering that we face very severe shortages in the school system, right? So you have people going on religious holidays and who are undermining the quality of education in the school.
So obviously that's one issue, which I get your point. It's a matter of fairness where one group is getting more days off. I get that. But that could have been dealt with separately as, okay, we're not going to allow that anymore. This is a much more full-featured bill that's being tabled, right?
That's true.
And it seems to me clearly directed at fundamentalism and if we want to call it as we see it, Muslim fundamentalism.
Yeah, I don't want to say that, Elias. That the behaviors of some of these fundamentalists will certainly be covered by the bill, but I wouldn't dare say that this is what we're aiming at. What we're aiming at is strengthening a principle that we have established with the Bill 21, which is that the state in Quebec, and particularly the school system, public school system, is a safe space from religions, plural. Whatever religion. We believe, and I believe, and I've been believing this for a long time, that if you go to public school, you shouldn't be subjected to any religious influence or religious pressures. And what we've seen at Bedford and other reports and other verifications and investigations have confirmed that this was not the only case. Yeah. What we've seen is, for example, teachers refusing to transmit knowledge or content or substance relating, for example, to science, relating to education, sexual education, relating to the equality, the principle of equality between men and women not being taught in a classroom because either the teacher doesn't believe in it because it's contrary to his religious principles or convictions, but also because in some cases the kids will be shouting at you because you talk about equality between men and women, or because you talk about the equal rights for homosexuals, for gay people.
Sometimes the reports it's coming from the students, not from the front of the classroom.
Absolutely, and this is why in the bill that I've tabled yesterday, the overall principle, Elias, if you were to ask me, summarize in one word the bill, I would say responsibility. It becomes the responsibility of everyone working within the public school system to make sure that such fundamental values and principles such as equality of rights or secular schools should be respected by everyone, including the kids, including the students. And this is why in the bill we say that from now on, there will be I'm not sure how you translate it into English, but le code de vie de l'école, the kind of basic rules of the school, right? Every school has kind of
code of conduct.
The code of conduct, exactly. Well, the code of conduct from now on, once the bill is adopted, will include the obligation by the students to respect equality between men and women, to respect the rights of gay people, to live in dignity. I mean, there was this case, Saint-Maxime not Saint-Maxime this time, Lavoie, which is a big high school. There were students who basically, there was a teacher, intern teacher. Yeah, he was openly homosexual. He was asked, "Are you gay?" He said, said, "Yes, I'm gay." Well, in the days following his admission, there were actually students talking on some kind of social network site saying death, basically, I'm summarizing, death to the gay teacher. That's the kind of attitude I think we cannot accept in Quebec. And I think students who have this kind of behavior, who are shouting at a teacher because they don't want to hear about gay rights or equality between men and women, someone should sit down with these kids and say, look, this isn't right. They should talk to the parents and say, look, this kind of behavior in our classroom is not acceptable. And eventually, if the behavior doesn't change, there should be sanctions, Elias. There's some red lines that we shouldn't be crossing.
But of course, with Bernard Drainville, the Quebec Education Minister, there are detractors to any move like this. I want to read what the English Montreal School Board says. Of course, they've been at the forefront of
they're challenging
Bill 21.
That's right. Yeah.
So they say this: expanding the ban on the wearing of religious symbols in schools to cover all people who have contact with students equals intolerance. So I listened to what you just said. You just outlined cases of intolerance that are happening in schools. They say this move is intolerant and is intolerance. How do you view that? You're being accused of being intolerant with these moves.
Yeah, intolerant and racist, and every time you try to create that safe space from religious pressures, you're being accused of something. And it is, by the way, and I'm going to answer the question, but by the way, Elias, this is part of the problem. People are not standing up for these principles. They're so afraid of being accused of being racist that they just bow under pressure. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the findings by the investigators that looked into the situations in these 17 schools. They came back with a report and they said that in some cases, school administrators will not apply the rules, will not apply the law, because they're so afraid of being accused of bigotry or racism or whatever the heck, that they just give up. Mm-hmm. Well, that's enough. That's enough, man. I'm standing up for equality between men and women. You want to say I'm a racist for that? Well, you can say it as much as you want. I'm not gonna give up on this. I'm not gonna. So, to get back to the English School Board, look, there are two different philosophies here, right? One philosophy basically says, and this is the one that the English School Board adheres to, is anything goes. Anything goes. Well, I'm not of this opinion, and our government is not of this opinion. Our opinion is, you decide to work as a teacher. You have a religion, which is perfectly fine. It's your right. Well, it is not your place and your job to show what your religious convictions are in the school system. During working hours, you should keep it to yourself. The same way we're asking you to keep to yourself your political opinions, well, you should keep to yourself your religious convictions. So during working hours, you should take off your religious gear, your religious symbols, your religious signs, just during working hours. Whatever you want to do after working hours, before working hours, it's your business, it's your private life, and it is your right. Your right to adhere to whatever religion you believe in and to whatever God you believe in. Not a problem. Not a problem. But if you want to be a teacher, and from now on with this bill, if you want to be a teacher's assistant, if you want to be a child care educator in the school system, une éducatrice en service de garde, if you want whatever you want.
Why was that expansion so important? Why to expand the scope? What were you seeing that said, "Oh, we've got to have everyone covered now by this"?
Because we had this. It started with Bedford, right? We've established that it started with Bedford. After Bedford, we had several complaints and denunciations coming from several schools. Basically people saying, in my school, there's also problems with secularism. This law, this rule is not being followed, is not respected. So we decided to trigger a verification investigation into 17 different schools where, from which we had denunciations. The report came from the investigators saying, there's a problem with the prohibition of religious signs being limited to teachers. Why? Because the rapport of trust, the rapport of rapport de confiance, the rapport of
trust is
the
word,
trust, is not only between teachers and the kids. You can have a child educator who's developed a very close rapport of trust with a certain kid. You can have a psychologist, I shouldn't say that, a psychologist in the school system who's developed a very close relationship with a certain kid. You could have an orthophonist, you could have orthopédagogue, you could have a teacher's technicien en éducation spécialisée, teacher's aide, who's developed. So if the rationale is to prohibit any religious symbols to whoever has a rapport of authority, a rapport of trust with kids, well, that shouldn't be limited to teachers. Yeah. Anyone, any adult in the school system can develop this rapport of trust, and therefore the ban should apply to everyone.
Continuing in studio with Bernard Drainville, he's Quebec's education minister, and we're talking about the recent moves to strengthen secularism in the school system. So, Mr. Drainville, I want to get to this subject. And, before the break, we were talking about how there is a worry about when you advocate for measures like this, you're going to be accused of bigotry and racism, right? Yep. Let me present something to you here, why I think this happens, right? And I look at the voices from the Quebec government. We've got yourself, and we've got Jean-François Roberge, we've got the Premier François Legault, and these are all white men who are making a move that people say is going to affect primarily Muslim women. And the thing that I've done on this show, sometimes I feel I'm a better advocate for Bill 21 than you guys, because on this program, what do? I've brought on Muslim women, secular and cultural Muslim women. You must be familiar. Nadia El Mabrouk, Mandana Javan.
Yes.
Hasn't been on the show, but Fatima Abubakar has been very vocal on the issue. We've had Yasmin Mohammed, who's lived in Quebec for a time, vocal on the issue. I could bring up more names, right? Shouldn't the face of this, if what you say is true, and you're talking about what happens in the schools, shouldn't you be bringing in more voices of those who chose Quebec because they love that it's secular to be the face of this, as opposed to politician after politician that fits another type of demographic profile? Maybe you've opened yourself up to some of that criticism.
Well, I certainly encourage the women whose name you mentioned to be vocal, to come on the air as you do with them, to come out publicly, to be as vocal as possible. I hope that some of them will be able to participate in the parliamentary commission that will look into the bill. I know some of these women. Some of them I have a good rapport with. Maybe in the future we will have more and more politicians coming from diverse backgrounds. We already have some, like Chris Skeet, for example, who's I'm being told a regular guest of yours, Christopher Skeet.
We went to Dawson together. So
yeah, he comes from. I think the expression diversity. The diversity is a proper word here. We have other ministers coming from other kind of backgrounds. But in the end, Elias, one of the reasons I so strongly believe in secularism and in religious neutrality is because I see secularism as a kitchen table. where we all gather as citizens, whatever our religious background or ethnic background, or the color of our skin is. I want a place within Quebec society where we're all alike, we're all citizens, we're all alike in the sense that we're all citizens, and that, we come together because we are, not because we're different, but because we are alike, because we're all human beings. And we want happiness for ourselves and the kids. We want to live in a society that shares some fundamental values. So, I strongly believe in diversity. I think it's a great strength. So I strongly believe in recognizing each other's differences. But I also believe that there's a time in a society where we must also insist upon what makes us
unique?
No. I think we must stress our uniqueness, but we must also stress what we share. That's the word
The common values.
The common values,
Gotcha.
exactly. We must find an equilibrium, a balance between strengthening our differences, but also strengthening our common values.
I had a high school teacher on this program about an hour ago. I asked her about this subject, and one of the things she said is, it's not what's on their head, it's what's in their head. Do the moves you've made deal with that? Because it seems like whether it's a religious symbol that's being worn, it doesn't affect what's in someone's brain. And how do you tackle that part of this?
Well, it is true that someone who's not wearing a religious symbol could very much have a religious behavior in a school system, for example, in a classroom. It is true. But when you wear a religious symbol in a classroom, you exhibit your religious convictions. No one can question that. So, we're trying to put into places rules and laws that will make sure that, for example, the teaching will be exempted will not be subject to religious influences. But we're also saying, if you come into the classroom and you show your religion, that is not right. In the public school system, that is not right. You should keep it to yourself, before working hours and after working hours, as I said earlier. But when you're in the presence of school kids, I'm sorry, I'm getting tired, I think. When you're in the presence of school children, it is not your place, it is not your job to show what your religion is, the same way it is not your job to show what your political opinion is.
Let me just end on this, because the Supreme Court's going to be looking at Bill 21. Some would say, even taking the case showed a little bit of activism from the Supreme Court, given how well Bill 21 fared in the lower courts. What happens if the Supreme Court of Canada takes a look and goes far beyond what even the lower courts have done on the bill, and says, no.
On our bill?
Yeah, on Bill 21.
That Bill 21?
No, on Bill 21. On Bill 21. What do you think happens if that's the case? If the Supreme Court of Canada goes against Bill 21, what do you think happens then?
I don't want to get into this, Elias. We'll let the courts do their job. All I know is that in this particular case, with the bill I've tabled yesterday, we've decided to use the notwithstanding clause, which is allowed in the Constitution. And the reason why we did it is to protect the bill, because we believe that in the end, this bill protects the kids. In the end, the reason why I'm an education minister, Elias, the reason why I get up in the morning, and the reason why I tabled this bill yesterday is to make sure that our kids are secured. When they go to school into an environment that will allow them to learn freely and not be exposed to religious influences.
That's Quebec's Education Minister, Bernard Drainville. Monsieur Drainville, à la prochaine.
À la prochaine, Monsieur Elias.